Enjoy your panel.
Recorded in progress. All right, got it.
Please enjoy.
Thanks.
Remo, taking the charge of this panel. Thank you a lot to all participants. I am sure that will be a great success. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing it. Yes. We should have another speaker, which is also a colleague of mine, of ours, actually. Dr. Silvia Barbotto. I'll check my telephone whether she's writing or something. Okay, she's coming, yes. Dr. Darmenio, you look very familiar. I think we have met somewhere, or just through the social networks.
Some other conference, I think, or on social network.
Social networks can be.
Probably.
Okay. It's a nice experiment of face
recognition.
Yeah. Elsa Soro is here as well. Hello, Elsa.
Hello, Remo.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ciao, Remo. Ciao.
Good morning.
Good luck with this very early morning session.
Thank you.
You're ready.
Okay. We also have I assume SFB should be Silvia Borbotto, right? There we go. Good morning, Silvia. Can you hear us?
Good morning, Remo. Yes, but I'm trying to connecting myself with the computer and it's not working in this moment. So I just send you the PowerPoint just in case and we can communicate like this. It's okay?
Is your connection working? Because if it's not, then I would invert the presentation.
No, it's my connection is working. It's
Okay.
just the computer is something wrong, but no problem. You have in your email my PowerPoint. If you can help me to show and I can speak. It's okay.
Is your screen sharing not working?
Is my exactly my screen sharing is not working.
Okay, then I would suggest the following. If Professor Darmenio is
no, but no, sorry,
okay.
Remo, sorry. I have to to speak now, and I tried yesterday to do this point, and it was working because I follow some.
Okay, then 1 minute because I need to take your presentation in another laptop. Okay?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes. Good morning, Elsa Soro.
Good morning, Silvia.
And maybe somebody else. And so there are many. Okay, we are in the same panel. Hello.
Hello.
And maybe somebody else is with us.
Good morning, Silvia. Good luck. Good luck,
Good
everybody.
morning. Massimo, good morning. It's strange Zoom because it's half an hour. I'm trying to connect this, but when the Congress is not start yet, so it's a problem to do any kind of tricky here. Okay.
So
Thank you.
you should be able to see the presentation now.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much, Remo.
Okay, then let's start the session. Good morning to everyone who is attending the panel today. The panel is called The Meaning of Artificial Faces. We will have three presenters. The first presenter is Professor Silvia Barbotto, whose title would be Traces of Facial Emanations in Multimedia Art. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Remo, and all the organizers. Thank you, Massimo Leone, also for inviting us to this wonderful panel called The Meaning of Artificial. So I ask yes to our moderator to show our PowerPoint, but at the moment it's okay to stay a little bit in this page, and I will tell you thank you to move it a few tableaux. My presentation is the title is Traces of Facial Emanation in Multimedia Art. It's okay. The first is okay. Just to starting with this issue, and I will read some part of my presentation, and we can have a short time to discuss together. This presentation is already a passage from an article from other stimulation about call for paper about traces from Roma Sapienza. So this is like a resume. The chronotopological coordinates of this text are distributed on a variable axis of contemporary art, highly characterized by the interpenetration between the new media and socio-psychological human nature. Starting from the study of the general panorama of art and semiotic paradigms in relation to the face and assuming them to be part of a polyphonic semisphere, we can observe how some samples flourish from the tangible but not often ignored traces.
Silvia, excuse me.
Yes.
Maybe it would be good not to put the microphone so close to the. Okay, so otherwise we don't hear very well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sorry, and can you hear me better like this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so we are trying to speak about traces that are left everywhere by humans during our daily life, while some other traces are totally imbricated in the face from which or in which they transpire. Starting from Peirce's tripartition of sign, we turn our attention to indexes such as those type of signs causally connected with their object. Quoting Peirce in Umberto Eco 2016, indexicality opens its territory by expanding presential option of the object or reference and allowing the introduction of an indirect but imbricated correlation between expression and content. Still quoting Eco, the presence of the object is not necessary for the sign to signify, although it is required to verify the use of the sign in an act of reference. The topotensivity inherent in the indexes highlight the spatial relationship that builds the semantic pathway, which propitiates different directional movement and has various dynamic possibilities. Chronotensivity, on the other hand, emphasizes the temporal relation which can take backwards or proximal routes. A trace can therefore be read as a sign that makes it possible to return to the origin or as an indication yielding a new route. Motivation versus arbitrariness seems to be one of the driving forces behind circumstantial research. The trace as the motivated result of an underlying content, the trace as the motivator of a developing content ex post facto. A certain phenomenon, a sign, a set of signs, can constitute not only a model, but rather the basis on which a model is established. Approaching the traces implies a prior work of pertinentization and therefore observation, delimitation, argumentation. The outcome is a punctilious work of questioning not only the cause-effect linearity, but also the logic underlying the sign, for example, the constitution of text and of space. So we actually entered the semiotics of the body as text and archive as a space of figural memory resulting from a process of synchronic contact and diachronic reading of an echo of matter that refracts on itself and dissipates in the words of a spongy face imbued with penetrating magnitude. Thinking of the face as a space of discourse, as writing of a tale and narrative sign, does nothing other than propose the analytical gaze and opening scopic, inclusive of the stories already experienced. A summing up, quoting Fontanille 2003, from the perspective of the semiotic of text and the discourse, the body is first and foremost a site of meaning, and of a meaning that shapes from sensation and impressions that this body experiences in contact with the world. We can change the tableau. Thank you, Remo. Phenomenological and ontological references are often necessary to bring attention back to the becoming of material science. The construction and deconstruction of the subject through its traces to the constitution of the trace personality. The nude of the complex machinery that compose our face, expression and name, vibration and trace, there remains the neutral that is intrinsically expressive versatility, collection of immanent memory, secularized sediment of inadvertent power. So as we can see, we did like a tripartition. Let us consider the trace following three primaries, if not exclusive, lines of investigation. But before this, we have to make also a point about art system and the artistic paradigm as a model through which reality is approached and treated in accordance with criteria of intuition and freedom, and by reference to a specific modellist system that is, in terms of Lotman, quoting a structure of elements and rules of their combinations, existing in a state of fixed analogy to the whole sphere of the object of perception, cognition, or organization. The content of art as modeling system is the word of reality translated to the language of our consciousness, translated in turn to the language of the given form of art. So, summing up, we consider three lines of traces. We start from the second first, so we focus on the first because it's the most inherent to our panel about artificial faces. On the basis of the semiotic of the face is in inclusive assonant with semiotic of the body. We have already seen the idea of the body for Fontanille, and in a specificity the witness body, and elaborating it further in line with our criteria of those of other author or reference. So in the second model, we see as traces on or in the face. This model deals with the face in dialogue with first and foremost with its own circumscribed material form, with the well-known syntactical feature both in the combination of reading the sign of the face on the basis of physiognomy or other pseudoscience. And in the inscription of new sign, the trace is preponderantly an element of memory. Its element inhabit the organic microorganism, which, in the provision of the paradigm as well as syntagmatic reading of the figurativeness of the face, is then immersed in the authentication of the evidence of the state. The articulation of the face is a witness of contact enunciated, autopoietic resources, affiliation of intimate inscription whose vision and interpretation is crucial. We see an example of an artist, Jorit, that make this special portrait with a specific sign in the face of the people portrait. And is a question of matter, said also Fontanille, that is subject to force, balance with the given that take form. In this example, the artists make this kind of signs as the pertinence of to a tribe, and for going deeper in this kind of performance, he made just a few months ago a treatment of scaring his own face. We don't go deeper to this example, and just quoting the other example, please, Remo, if we can change our tableau. And in this second point, as we see, we are speaking about traces erased towards new track. This is a very quick panorama about a huge artist group that made amazing works of art. They are called Janet Jansa, and to resume their work, we can just say that the most important act, political, social, and of course semiotic action that they did, it was in 2007, change their name. All their name, they are from Slovenia, Italy, and Croatia, and they changed their name. So as reverberation of the sentence as a mnemonic stabilization of the self, they spend a few times, for example, memorizing and performing their new name in a high voice. So they with this act and maintaining the compactness of the body and the face, but they change their name in this very meaningful artistic act. I think that we can go deeper in the first example. Thank you very much, Remo, to go in the other. Yes, thank you. So here we are speaking about tracing emanating from the face. The body in movement constitutes itself in a deictical marked path, and therefore at least path is recorded from traces. So from it derives the first type of emanation in a sort of enunciation in which the narration of the trace runs along opposite routes, no? In this case mentioned, the trace is contextualized within an aspirational path projected into the future, and the predictive argument underlying it is a discovery rather than a finding. The mode of existence of the new constitute subject is an inventive simulacrum actualized and projective. It means an artificial phase. Traces have always been an important tool, not only in establishing in contract, albeit the provisional one, with mixing texts, but also in setting up possible paths on the basis of conjectural similarities. In some culture, the reading become a kind of science of art. For example, Patricia Magli in his wonderful book speak about rastreadores mentioned in Borges, and the art of Chiafa, that means follow, the art of following the track. But in our case, we have the artist Heather Dewey Harbour that work with traces of as work of art using hair, cigarettes, chewing gum that she take off from the street, and then through programs she builds 3D faces through the DNA found in this object, characterized by the interpenetration between new media and human psychological nature. Her proposal questioned the awareness of production emanating from material which, read backwards, can venture into the rewriting of new text. The frontier between biomolecular and indifferent modulation, one's own and other spatiality, the intimate and the contextual body blur but still perpetuate. The physical delimitation, which so clearly distinguish between ipseity, or means ownness, and otherness, fades away, giving rise to a continuous echo, a constant diffuse mnemonic trace which interacts with the environment. It may simply merge with it, or instead be considered writing and thus be reinterpreted and made pertinent. So I can follow a few minutes more, or maybe I just can almost stop over here, showing this example that suggest through these steps she collect and then extract DNA and then analyze it computationally through genomic research, and then parameterize 3D phase based on this trace, and she print finally in a 3D printing machine. So she said initially it was like a project, but she found many inspiration also through the other system that are more and more common in the actuality. For example, there are applications like a Parabon snapshot that elaborates specific personality by exclusion and predict physical characteristics, include skin pigmentation, eye and hair color, face morphology, sex, and genomic ancestry, and identify distant familial relationship between samples. So the trace emanating from the face is an indication of what has been an organic remnant of a passage that has taken place, whose sign, albeit ephemeral, are installed in a material that preserves them. But then the reading of that is cultural and, in this case, algorithmical programmation. Okay, following and final steps, quoting Umberto Eco, we say the naive interpreter reads every projection as an imprint. For example, as a direct transformation from the properties of a real thing, whereas projection is always the result of transformative convention, whereby certain traces on surface are stimuli that prompt one to transform backwards and postulate a type of content where in fact there is only one occurrence of expression. Thus, it is possible to project from nothing or from context to which no reference correspond. So this is always combinatorial positioning that does not appeal to a precise codification, precise codifying rules, but rather leverage the continuous performative possibility of form and track. One click more to say thank you to everybody, and we are here to make a short discussion or question. Thank you very much for listening, for sharing this time.
Thank you very much for this talk. Now the floor is open for a few questions. We have a few minutes left before the next presentation, so I would invite the people who are present to formulate questions if there are. Thank you. Seems that there are not questions at this time. So in this case, I would thank a lot Dr. Barbotto, and I would move on to the next speaker. Right.
Thank you to you, Remo, and all these panelists. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. The next speaker is Dr. Enzo D'Armenio, and his talk is as follows: Identity and Social Networks, a Dramaturgy of the Face in Digital Environments. The floor is yours.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, or rather there, connected to listen to my conference talk. I would like to start by thanking the organizer of this important conference, and I would also like to address a special thanks to Massimo LEONE for allowing me to participate in this FACETS panel, even if I'm not directly involved in its research activities. This consideration allows me to introduce my research, which is being developed in the framework of a Marie Curie project entitled IMACTIS, Fostering Critical Identities Through Social Media Archival Images. This project is focused on the study of identity-related images on social network and shares with FACETS an eminent interest in the semiotic role of the face. So my intervention will consist in three basic thematic blocks. First of all, I would like to introduce my research by talking about its central hypothesis, which is based on a semiotic interpretation of full-recourse theory of identity.
Okay, one announcement, please. I would ask all the people who are in the panel to kindly switch off their microphones. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Remo. Secondly, I will focus on the relationship between the face and images, comparing the tool of visual semiotics with the framework proposed by Hans Belting in Face and Mask, A Double History. Finally, I will present two fields of analysis of social networks where is deployed what I call a dramaturgy of the face, although in light of Belting's hypothesis, we could rather call it a dramaturgy of face masks. As far as my research is concerned, it is based on a reinterpretation of Paul Ricoeur's theory of identity and its application to social networks. In his now classic book, Oneself as Another, Ricoeur conceived of identity as a dynamic core composed of two interrelated polarities. On the one hand, there is the identity idem, which includes instinctive dispositions, character traits, the body understood in its typical dynamism, and habits. Overall, the identity idem is composed of the set of traits that allow us to recognize a person as the same and which incorporate its invariable and static core. On the other hand, the identity ipse pertains to the behavioral identity, the ethical values chosen to build a lasting conduct, the heroic figures underlying one's own transformation, and the innovative habits adopted to reprogram it. In order to manage this complex relationship between the two polarities of identity, it is necessary to build a narration that combines them together in a lasting unity. It is the narrative intelligence of a story that allows us to fill the interval of meaning that separates these two polarities. Ricoeur identifies the construction of identity as a critical appropriation of the models of verbal storytelling, particularly those of literature. It is precisely thanks to a critical appropriation of the literary model of narration that it is possible to apply fabulation to life and to give identity a durable, meaningful, and flexible form. This theoretical model allows us to identify the tension to which identity is exposed on social networks. On the one hand, identity is confronted with renewed experiential pressure. The strong presence of simple images, which limit themselves to showing the presence of an individual on different occasions, think of selfies, and which are poorly articulated at a discursive level, are a clear example of this experiential pressure. Even the acts of liking, following, and sharing, which are at the basis of the constitution of collectives, reveal a sphere of a basic semiotic interaction, close to our character dispositions. For this reason, it is possible to situate this experiential regression as pertaining to the sphere of identity idem. On the other hand, the way in which our behavior is analyzed and modeled by algorithms pertains to the sphere of the identity ipse. We can think of the way in which Facebook recommends friends on the basis of our current circle of acquaintances, the way in which Netflix recommends personalized viewing schedules based on what we have previously watched and enjoyed, and even the way Tinder and Grindr recommends sexual and romantic partners on the basis of the face and profiles we have liked. This system of behavior modeling and of proposing recommendations can be understood as entailing a risk of progressive delegation of the identity ipse to an algorithmic intelligence. In order to manage this two pressure, experiential and algorithmic, it is necessary to build, as Ricoeur has stated, an identity narration that can critically articulate them. The fundamental difference, however, lies in the model of appropriation required to achieve this process. It is no longer a question of literary models, but of models capable of physically displaying identities. In other words, we need to address models belonging to the languages of image, starting with the forms of the portrait up to other practices capable of visual structuring and narration, such as audiovisual story, television production, games narrative, and so on. Our hypothesis is that every image builds a negotiation between these two pressures, even if it's skewed towards one of the two poles. It is clear that identity narration on social network exploits the body and in particular the face in a privileged manner. In his book, Face and Mask, A Double History, Belting proposes a series of enlightening considerations that allow us to describe the face as a semiotic device. To summarize, we may say that Belting gives a central role to the dynamism of facial mimicry, to the plastic appearance of the face animated over time. What interests me is the relationship between the dynamism of mimicry and the production of particular expression, which Belting frames by means of two metaphors. On the one hand, the face produces masks, for example, to conceal and protect emotion and and not let them transpire outwards. On the other hand, and more profoundly, Belting argues that the face is a plastic device that composes images. I would like to point out a strong correspondence with the expressive system of images. Authors such as Jean-François Bourdron have rightly pointed out that the meaning system of images cannot be traced back to verbal predication, precisely because images signify in a completely different way. Like faces, images do not predicate, but rather compose. Another interesting aspect of this relationship concerns the centrality of perceptual mechanism in the semitization of images and face. In both images and face, recognition is a fundamental semiotic mechanism. It is the recognition of such or such specific trait, for instance, a particular configuration of fear or of a particular shade of yellow that counts, and not the categorical generality of the concept of yellow or fear. What this parallelism allows us to do is to identify the way in which image configuration and face configuration are stabilizing on social media compared to past representations of the face. First of all, as far as still images are concerned, we need to recall how the classical genre of the portrait resolves the tension between the compositional qualities of the face and the compositional qualities of images. Belting rightly tells us that the portrait stands in relation to the face as an externalized and objectified mask on a support, which makes it a durable, transportable object, but which inevitably erases the temporal dynamic character of mimicry. Two aspects are of particular interest to us. The first concerns the way in which the visual mask relates to the identity of the person represented. Anne Béard-Gelane and Maria Giulia Dondero, who have carried out some of the most important semiotic studies on the subject, insist on the iconization of the character of the individual, which is summed up, condensed, and best presented in the portrait. The portrait must be capable of condensing the subject's past, present, and future, capturing his or her identity and destiny in a single image. For this reason, in classical pictorial portraits, the objects and the background often build a narration capable of harmonizing the visual aspect of the character, which are the trait of the identity them expressed by the face, with visual elements pertaining to the subject conduct and thematic role, that is, the identity ipse as may be expressed by effigies, professional or rank object. In short, a classical portrait is a unique image turned towards the future in accordance with a memorial temporality capable of iconizing a narration identity within a fixed images. We can compare this model to the selfie and more generally to identity-related images that circulate on social network. The major differences are linked to the temporal dimension and to the various identity dynamics. Social network shots are images that do not aim at iconizing and condensing a character within a single shot, but rather build a repeated series of shots that pluralize identity, fragment it, and reenact it in different contexts. The temporality of production and reception constitute a pellicular temporality, which develops itself in close proximity to the act of visualization and sharing. In other words, it is not a question of building a visual narrative that can summarize the life of an individual, but a theatricalization of the face in accordance with the management of the present of the self. With respect to recourse consideration, we could say that while the portrait aimed to build a narrative elaboration of the overall identity, idem and ipse, social network portraits are often a simple exhibition and multiplication of the identity idem. In an article submission for the scientific journal Semiotica, I propose an analysis of the Instagram profile of Rupi Kaur, a Canadian poet and influencer of Indian origin, from the beginning of her activities until today. I was able to identify the change in style from a casual use of her portraits to a competitive planned exploitation of her images. In other words, I try to describe the process of transformation from a casual user to an influencer. In this analysis, I found a wide variety of deformations of the portrait genre, some of which may be seen in contemporary photographic art, including turning one's back to the camera, the use of veils and atmospheric occlusion, but also fragmented portraits, which are typical of social network, as noted by Lev Manovich in its Instagram book. The second comparison I would like to present concerns video production and more generally those images capable of exhibiting the dynamic mimicry of the face. It is the actor character nucleus in film, but also in theater, that constitutes the most emblematic case. As pointed out by Belting, the theatrical actor builds images and more specifically masks through his face and builds a character thanks to mimicry skills. In semiotic terms, we could say that it is a peculiar process of débrayage, starting from the overall articulation capabilities belonging to his own face and body. The actor projects a selection of emotional and mimicry features that constitute the identity of the fictional character. One aspect of this transformation strikes me as important, the filtering role of the script. The script allows us to find a peculiar articulation of the identity poles defined by Ricoeur. The actor certainly projects some of the character traits belonging to his identity, but these remain embedded in his person. The actor therefore lends part of his identity hidden dispositions to the fictional character. The fictional character, on the contrary, is a narrative identity, one already endowed with a closed path of transformation with values of departure and arrival. The mimetic projection of the actor, together with the narrative mediation of the script, allow to build this transformation, in which the face and the body of a person builds a rich, dynamical, and narrative identity. We could qualify this process as the donning of a fictional mask by the actor worn on the face. We can relate the actor character to the most representative and emblematic figure on social network, that is the influencer. What these two figures have in common is that they owe their success to their public image and, if we take streamers into account, to their mimicry identity. We will develop the comparison using an example shows for its clarity, that of horror video game streamers on the dedicated platform Twitch. Usually, these live broadcasts are organized as follows. The video game performance is displayed full screen with a virtual avatar moving in the digital environment according to a text. In this case, the video game text, which is already organized narratively, but certainly in a less strict manner than a movie script may be, since it allows the expression of various styles of gameplay. On the right of the screen, we usually find the chat through which the audience can interact with the streamer. Most often, it is very short messages which are sent, mainly emoticons and peculiar forms of slang. Finally, a smaller window shows the face of the streamer who reacts live to the game performance and to the chat messages. Compared with the actor, the streamer does not project a character on the basis of his skills in terms of mimicry. On the contrary, he attempts to extract his identity character without prior programming and preparation. The filter is not that of a closed narration condensed into a script, but a playful script which organizes in a partly open way the mimic responses of fright, tension, exaltation, and so on. In other words, the narrative mediation provided by video game texts does not serve to build a narrative identity, but to extract a live character identity. It is no coincidence that this filter belongs to the macro genre of games, a practice by definition situated somewhere between lived experience and cultural construction. The character which emerges from this interaction does not use a narrative mask, but a playful socialized mask, whose purpose is precisely to embody its own identity item, making it emerge dynamically within a partially structured experiential interaction. Compared to the case of the actor, the temporal dimension should again be emphasized. The performance of mimicry is strongly linked to the present moment, to the personality expressed naturally, with a visual direction that is limited to a fixed shot of his face. Reaction videos and children games channel replicate this formula and show us the peculiar way in which the link between images and faces increasingly tends to adhere to an identity close to genuine, instinctive, and contagious reaction. It is a matter of taking a song, a trailer, the execution of a cooking recipe as the basis for exhibiting through facial mimicry the visible expression of one's reaction during a first encounter with a widely known cultural product. To conclude, it is possible to say that social networks are characterized by a strong detachment from the fictional and narrative models advocated by Ricoeur. The identity models for social networks rather concern a management of visual presence over time, capable of exhibiting the identity item in a manner that is as close as possible to actual experience. It is also possible to detect a second tendency, a narrowing of the strategy built on the languages of images in favor of the compositional qualities of the face, which multiplies the mask of presence thanks to the growing number of digital channels. As regards future line of research, it will be necessary to deepen the understanding of the relationship between the expressive quality of the face and of images. In particular, to identify other kinds of masks produced by faces within images. In addition to the iconizing mask of portraits, the multiple experiential mask of selfies, the fictional mask of the filmic or theatrical character, and the socialized playful mask of influencer we have tried to describe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very rich presentation, Dr. D'Armenio. We have quite a few minutes if there are questions from the audience, so I invite everyone to formulate their comments or questions, please. Seems that the coffee still has to make their own effects.
Okay, Remo?
Yes, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you to Enzo D'Armenio too, as we are in the same panel. Okay, just to make some felicitation is not exactly a question, but is more remarkable about this following research about the like a kind of dialogue between dichotomy as we recognize, we focus in one hand in the recognition, so all the work of algorithm that Enzo show in a very deep way, and maybe in here his thesis is more and more deeper. Maybe you can tell us something more. And the idea of cognition, no? Maybe we can sometimes come back again to this recognition as a confirmation of something previous, now some referring to this cognition of ourselves. So maybe Enzo, if you want to say a few words about this term.
Okay, thank you for the question. Concerning algorithms, it's difficult to talk about them because it's not clear how they work. But in the case of the Ricoeur theory of identity, there is an idea that people will behave in the same way as the past. So there is this idea of an algorithm as someone who ensures the continuation of a behavioral conduct So it's really an idea of applying in a certain way a cognition about the behavior of people, and then give recommendation to continue this behavior conduct without accident, without innovation. So it's interesting because there is an idea of cognition which is linked to programming, and I don't know if I answered the question.
I also would like to make a little comment or a little question. I was wondering, what is your take on making this parallel between selfies and portraits? Whether this parallel, I mean, what is the, let's say, advantage we can take between those two parallels, especially considering the fact that somewhat they were emerged in a sort of different contexts, and also probably their values. I'm not an expert of art history, but I'm sure there are people in the audience who are very competent on this field. I was just wondering what is your take on this, let's say, comparison between portraits on one hand and let's say selfies on the other. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It was a book by Anne Bayard-Gelin who compared selfies to portrait and auto-portrait in order to find some macroscopic differences. So, of course, there are some differences, but there are also some basic similarities. For example, the idea that it's the author of the image which it's also the person portrayed. But of course, there are completely different contexts. The selfie is linked to the smartphone, even in the definition, the dictionary. But in a certain way, we can find out some differences, in particular concerning the temporality, because portraits are images addressed to the future, to the history of art, to art history, we can say. On the contrary, selfies are for fast consumption and multiplication. So for this reason, it's useful to find really this difference, even if we have images which show face. So similarity in the subject portrayed, but big differences concerning the temporal dimension, the identity dimension, even the social dimension.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Are there any more comments from the audience?
Finishing and linking to this last question, also saying thank you for the answer of the other question. And yeah, the idea of selfie and portrait is limiting even more in auto-portrait. So it's this parallelism. And I was working in another text where I got some information from our main panel, Dr. Massimo LEONE, that work a lot about selfie, and where he underlined, even in selfie, this tripartition of Umberto Eco, no? The intention, autoris, lectoris, operis, where the intention operi is the main one, no? Like a semiotic structure. I have some of the text here that is intrinsic to the form of self-representation that and produce meaning independently of any individual, no? Other authors trying to get closer, selfie and portrait, but even the differences are more. For example, somebody said selfies are images shared as part of conversation, a series of contextual interaction, and are connected to the selfie maker in an intimate, embodied, and felt way. So it's a good question. Is more than a question, is a good stimulus, Remo. Thank you. Also, I got from your stimulus to penetrating more this issue about differences and proximity, and as like a subgroup. Now, if portrait is a main group, a gender, we can then go deeper and identify selfie as subgender. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to read this article. I will try to find out.
I'm sure that Professor Leone would be available to send you this article in case, but I'm pretty sure that the article will be also available online. Yes.
Online, I will search it. Thank you.
So I will share the screen now, and hopefully you will be able to see it. Can you shout if you do see the screen with the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks. So the title of my presentation is as follows: Fake Faces and Digital Forgeries on the Uses and Misuses of Symbol and Digital Manipulation. So the interest of this presentation lies on the digital manipulation of face images. So what is the interest of this talk? Within the larger area of the techniques of digital manipulation, my interest lies on the techniques of manipulation, which is called deepfake. Now, deepfake videos are videos in which faces have been swapped using machine learning and deep neural networks, which is why we have the word deep in the construction of deepfakes. So the word deep stands for deep neural networks. Now, the output of this creation is a very realistic simulation of existing videos. There are different types, so a host of varieties of deepfakes with videos, audios, and they are produced for different purposes. The common denominator is that they somewhat mimic an existing content, making the fake look like the real. So deepfake, as you know, was introduced in 2017, and it was quite a jump in the world of digital manipulation. Now, I believe that the blurring of the distinction between authentic and fake videos poses important epistemological questions that semiotics cannot ignore. This presentation is a part of a larger project where I contribute as a postdoctoral researcher. The research is called FACETS, which stands for Face Aesthetics in Contemporary E-Technological Societies, and is led by Professor Massimo Leone, which I thank for organizing this panel. There are a few things which I'd like to talk to you today. To start with, one may wonder whether the time we live in marks a new era whereby fakes and forgeries are predominant. Is it really so, and what are the implications of this statement? There is also a corollary to this question, quite important. What sets aside such new forms of digital manipulation as compared to the ones of the past, so to the more traditional forms of fakery? On a more theoretical level, we should probably ask, what has a semiotics of fakes and falsification achieved so far? What can we learn from it? And what are the future challenges ahead? Last but not least, deepfakes and digital manipulation of face images have pivotal ethical, social, and epistemic ramifications which need to be spelled out. Faking is a very complex phenomenon that has exercised a fascination upon the human mind for millennia. Fake, fiction, illusion, manipulation, and deception are topics that are often reported in the media and discussed as academic subjects. Today, such matters are at the forefront of discussion, arousing interest among experts and ordinary people alike. Already in the 1970s, Gray-Mass pointed out that the human race has entered into an era in which symbol manipulation became the dominant paradigm. As a result of this, the boundaries, again, between plausibility and veracity, between truth and certitude became blurred. I think that today the paradigm of symbol manipulation has seen a re-emergence through the widespread use of digital media. As Jürgen Rouch spelled out, through digital media, communication, messages, images have been decoupled, so detached from the original sources. And as a result of this, it became quite difficult to assess the truthfulness of the speakers and their credibility. Now, there is a strange paradox going on in the field of semiotics. As it is well known to all the students of this subject, there is a famous definition of semiotics which interlocks the study of signs with the possibility of lying by means of the same signs. This story has been told so often that I am exonerated from repeating it once more. One would, however, expect that the natural development of semiotics would include the study of the semiosis of deception, and that, broadly speaking, phenomena like lies, deceits, masks, simulations, fakes, and all devices of misrepresentations would somewhat appear to be the proper domain of semiotics. In fact, quite the contrary is true, I would say. Despite the fame of Eco's definition, semiotic research on this subject, the subject of falsity, of fakery, of deception, has been scant and has been fragmentary, I would say, with a rare exceptions. Now, digital manipulation has a long pedigree, and there are plenty of examples in art history of fakes and forgeries. Image fakery gained momentum with the rise of photography, and today has reached its pinnacle through the use of artificial intelligence and deep learning techniques. The different methods of photo fakery have been brilliantly studied by Dino Brugioni, who is an authority in this field. Brugioni pointed out 4 ways in which a photograph, so a picture, can be altered and can be manipulated. Information can be removed from an image, as it is shown in this example by Brugioni. A second way of manipulating a photograph would be instead by adding information to the photograph itself. The third way would be through photomontage. So you can take 1 or more photographs and you can combine them. The fourth way of manipulating a picture is when you actually have a photograph which is true. So it is a concrete photograph which is being taken, but it purports and it depicts something which is false. This technique is called false captioning in the typology of Brugioni. Now, there is a key distinction which can be drawn from these examples I just shown you, taken by Brugioni's book. There are, I would say, 2 broad categories that can be distinguished here. On one hand, we have falsification, and on the other hand, we have the forgery. Falsification occurs when an object has been altered in some ways or another in order to make it different from what it is. A forgery is somewhat a different story, because a forgery in the strict sense of the word is an object which is in fact manufactured, which is forged entirely to be passed off as what is not. So there is not only one characteristic which is altered, but it is entirely forged. As for example, an object that has been passed off as an antique would be a classical example of forgery in the strict sense of the word. Now, a preliminary question would be then whether deepfake videos would fall into the basket of falsification, in the basket of forgery, or a mix of both categories. Now, I find it quite interesting that this distinction between falsification and forgery fits very well the main structure of deception as was described by Barton Bowyer. Bowyer pointed out two main ways in which deception occurs. On one hand, there is dissimulation, and on the other hand, there is simulation. Whilst the purpose of dissimulation is to hide the real, the purpose of simulation is to display the false. Now, both dissimulation and simulation include three different techniques of deception, which make in total 6 basic ways of deceiving. Now, for the time being, I'm interested only in 2 of those ways of deceiving because they parallel the 2 main concepts I laid out before, namely falsification and forgery. The categories I am interested in are mimicking and inventing. I will give you a description of what mimicking is. In mimicking, a replica of reality is created by selecting one or more characteristics of the real in order to achieve an advantageous effect. A good example of mimicking is face swap. This is an example of face swap of famous politicians. So face swap is a technique through which the face of famous politician has been changed with the face of another, with a very realistic and uncanny effect. Different is, however, the case of inventing, in fact. In inventing, the false is displayed through the fashioning of an alternative reality and do not simply through the mimicking of an existing characteristics of the reality. So there would be a difference between mimicking and inventing, in which somewhat it is mirrored, the difference between falsification and forgery. But what happened with deepfakes, we all know. Here is an example, quite famous example.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you.
Then the question for us would be the following. How do we make sense of such an examples of deepfakes from the perspective of our own field of study, which is semiotic? We owe to Umberto Eco the first formulation of a fully fledged semiotic theory of falsification. Umberto Eco set out a very sophisticated typology of fakes, of which I will lay out only the main categories that can be used for today's topic. So among the many semioticians, I will just focus on Eco's theory, showing his semiotics of falsification. The first type of Eco's semiotics of fakes and falsification is what he terms as doubles. Now, doubles concern the replica, or the replicability of an object, and they do not intend to deceive. So a double is a physical occurrence that has got all the properties of another physical occurrence. Examples of doubles are 2 eggs or two sheets of paper, which can be used alternatively and interchangeably for the same purpose, which is writing here. The second type, the second head in Eco's typology is what he called pseudo doubles. So there is a pseudo double when one single occurrence takes on a particular value for one of the following reasons. It can take a specific value because of its origin, as for example, the first car, Model T, produced by Ford. An object can also take on a specific value because it was used in a particular context, as for example, the Holy Grail, which was used in the context when Jesus Christ was actually living. But now we come to the most important part of Eco's classification. So now we have reached the third category of falsification, and also the most important point for the purpose of this presentation, which is called false identification. What is false identification in Eco's typology of fakes? So a false identification may occur when there are two different objects, therefore object A and object B, which are produced by two different authors in two different historical contexts. These two objects can be identified as being identical or indiscernible either by one individual or by a group of individuals who decide that these two objects are then identical. This stance leads to a host of different problems. First of all, the issue of intentionality. There are two different levels of intentionalities at stake in this case. First of all, there is the intention of the people who produced the object B, which is made to resemble the object A. Secondly, there is the intention of the people who identified the object B with the object A as being, in fact, identical objects. So if we consider the first case, so if we consider the people who produced object B, we can distinguish then a bona fide intention and a mala fide intention. The author B might have produced the object B maliciously to pass off something fake for real, but he might also have acted in good faith. So we have two different cases. However, much more complex is the situation of the intention of those who have decided that object A and object B are identical. So a consideration of the subject's knowledge and beliefs adds up a level of complexity to this example, to this problem. According to the type of belief and the knowledge of the individual or the group who have identified object A and object B as being identical, Ecos singles out 4 different cases of false identification. The first case is what Eco calls a confusion between identity and interchangeability. So someone knows very well that the object A cannot be identified with the object B, which was produced afterwards by imitation, but believes that the two objects are interchangeable in value and in function, and uses and presents one as identical to the other. The second case is different and is called malicious false identification. In this case, someone knows that the object B is just an imitation of object A and cannot be identified with it, nor does he believe that the two objects are interchangeable. But in bad faith, he pretends and says that object B is identical to object A. The third case, identified by Eco, is a false identification of two different objects, which is made simply because the individual or the group of individuals who assess these objects are just inexperienced or they lack knowledge. In this case, the person or the individual ignore that the two objects are not identical and believe they are the same object. There is then a fourth type in this typology of falsification, which is called the presumption of interchangeability. In this case, someone knows very well that object A and object B are different physical objects, but decides that under a certain description and for the purpose of a certain practice, one is as good as the other and is presented not as identical, but as completely interchangeable. I will now try to draw some distinctions and some conclusions for what concerns the implications of deepfakes. First of all, what are the implications then that can be drawn from this discussion of deepfakes, also in the light of the typology of falsification laid out by Umberto Eco? We should ask whether the future lying ahead to us is a sort of dystopic scenario where fakery becomes harder and harder to assess. So seeing would be not anymore believing. So one question for us would be to lay out some sort of critical skills that people need to operate in this scenario. If you take, for example, case 3 of people who lack knowledge and experience in assessing two objects, then it is obvious that some critical skills and technical skills are needed as well. If fakes and authentic are basically indistinguishable to the average internet users, there must be then other criteria, perhaps the content, perhaps the context, perhaps the historical records of the speaker, and so forth, in order to establish whether something we see is authentic, real, or not. Perhaps in the future, there will be a system of authentication by the author himself, but this remains certainly an open and unresolved problem. The most important implication from the semiotic point of view is that the two different levels of analysis are often mixed up one with another. In a nutshell, the aspects of convincingness, of truth, and of denotation of signs, might be a speech, might be a visual sign, or maybe a video, are not the same, although they are often mixed up. The result of this mixing levels of analysis together is simply adding up confusion to an aspect which is, in my opinion, already complex in and of itself. Being convincing does not equal to being truthful nor to being reliable. So from the semiotic point of view, deepfakes, as well as any type of misinformation, capitalizes on the mixing up of two aspects of the uses of science. Now there is a second point which I'd like to draw. Whilst in the past, fakes and forgeries were about falsifying objects of arts, so art objects and artifacts, today's target of digital manipulation is the essence of the individual, the human face, the speech of the individual and his actions. So what is considered to be the core of the identity of the individual, his own face, is being faked. If the quantity of images circulating on the web is directly proportional to the possibility of being the target of a deepfake, then almost anyone can be an object of deepfakes, not only celebrities and politicians. So in the case of a malicious false identification, this has considerable implications on the privacy and ethics, especially when there is no consent from the people involved. There is then a third conclusion, a third point, which I'd like briefly to mention. If we think of art history, we have a situation in which one single valuable item, conceived as an unicum, is the object of falsification by many skilled forgers. This means that one authentic object generates a host of fakes and copies that seek to mimic or to pretend to be like the original. Today, with the emergence of deepfake, it seems that the model of faking follows a reverse logic, in my opinion. There is not anymore a one-to-one replica, but a model of many-to-one. The production of deepfakes, in fact, entails the extraction of images of faces through deep learning. This process requires a very large amount of data. In other words, in order to create one deepfake video, you would need thousands, hundreds, and thousands of face pictures. This model of producing fakes is somewhat a reverse of the model in the past. I thank you for your attention, and I welcome questions by the audience. Thanks a lot. We have something like 5 minutes to devote to questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Concerning the possible positive consequences of deepfakes, because there are some terrifying aspects, but also we can imagine a sort of democratization of audiovisual languages. So if everyone can use other faces like masks, maybe if using this software, this solution to adopt deepfakes, it's another layer to communicate in a new manner. I will say that now we see only the risks for privacy, for engendering fakes, etc. But if we imagine a situation where deepfakes are their normalities and a new wave of express themselves, I would like to it's only a suggestion, but I don't know what kind of future could So the idea that deepfakes becomes a normal way of communicating on social network, but even in other contexts, if we can imagine that with advance in technological algorithms.
Sure, I think it's a very good point. So thank you for that. There would be certainly positive aspects too, which I couldn't, let's say, cover in such a very short presentation. First of all, it would be good to sort of use those semiotic tools in order to identify what we're talking about. So if we take, I don't know, a video by a famous politician, which is also, let's say, promoted as, a mimic of the real, just for fun or for promotional aspects or what have you, then I would say absolutely yes. And it's probably the scenario we will be facing in the future. But if we take what ECHO refers to as a case of malicious false identification, in that case, I'm afraid that it's still at present the implications and the ramifications for the individual and the people privacy would be still huge. I might emphasize, though, a sort of positive use in the creative arts industries. I think it's already been done in films and in creating videos of people who, for example, are not longer here. So they can use those type of deep learning techniques and artificial intelligence in order to recreate their presence, although they are not here. So there are certainly good aspects that can be taken into consideration. I mean, I didn't want to sound, let's say, apocalyptic rather than, but certainly this issue of obliterating the authentic and the real, it's something very fascinating and also very compelling. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see if there is some other comments from the audience. Has anyone else has questions or comments? I would say no. So I thank then all the participants to, let's see, there was a comment. Thank you. Thanks a lot. We are exactly on time, it's 9:25, and I've been told to leave the room exactly at this time. So thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.